I'm going to show you how using a hammer could actually help you play some better golf. And trust me, this will make sense, so bear with me. But let's look at the movement of the hammer. Does the hammer head go straight up and down like this? No, it's on an arc, it's on a curve. And what about the end of my hammer, the hammer head? Does that always point at the top of my post? Well, it doesn't, because as the hammer curves up, you can see it points somewhere else. If I use that perfect path, I can actually close my eyes and never miss. That's consistent. I can do that over and over and over without even worrying about missing. But what about if that hammer sort of went over here? What about if the end of the hammer twisted a little bit? Well, suddenly that makes the job of hammering this post in a lot more difficult. I'm going to get a lot more inconsistency and my results are going to be quite varied. So we know there is a best path or a best way to use that hammer. So how does that relate to your golf swing? Well, here's my hammer. I've attached it to this club shaft with a grip so it feels like a golf club. So if I wanted to knock this post towards my target, the same sort of things apply. If I set up now and I put the end of the hammer against the end of the post, I certainly wouldn't be able to move that hammer back and through on a straight line. Well, when I say I couldn't, I could, it just wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it? If I stood here and tried to move that hammer straight back along the ground and straight through, that just wouldn't look very natural, and you'd look at me thinking, what on earth are you trying to do with the golf swing? And it would almost look like I was trying to guide the hammer. And that's what we see with so many golfers, their golf swing, they're trying to guide the club. That would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? If we want to hit straighter shots, if we want to control the golf ball, let's guide the club straight back, let's guide it straight through, but that's not how the golf swing works. If we look at the end of the hammer and just look at its trace, what does it do from here? It actually moves upwards and inwards. It's on an arc, very similar, almost identical, that little demonstration that we did at the start. And then if we look at the end of the hammer, I probably should know the technical name for that, but we'll call it the hammer head. Does that point at the end of my post at setup? Yes, it does. But does it point at the end of my post through the whole motion? Well, no, again, that would feel uncomfortable. That would be me trying to guide the club and twist it. If I make a normal move away from the golf ball, look where the end of that hammer now points. It points sort of down and over here somewhere. So at this position, as I've moved the club away, this is almost identical to what we just showed you at the start. You know, the hammer had moved on an arc and the hammer head, or the end of the hammer, doesn't point at the top of the post. But this is the easiest place for us to move the hammer back and make contact with the post, or in this case, the golf club. So your job in the golf swing is to get your golf club what I call into the slot. You might have heard that terminology, that phrase before. And what that effectively means is it means that from the top of your golf swing, you know, look where the end of the hammer is. It's nowhere near pointing at the post. It's nowhere near in line with the post. Your job in transition is to get the hammer or your golf club back into this position. This is in the slot. Because from here, it's now the easiest place for me to rotate and hammer the back of that club, and I can do that with quite a bit of consistency because I was in the slot. So again, if we look at that first example and we relate this to the golf swing, how much more difficult would it be to hammer this post in towards my target if the hammer was coming from over here? Well, you can see that just wouldn't make a lot of sense because the hammer is working across that post. And if I was to catch the end of the post, what would happen to the club? It would probably sort of spin. It would add some curve to that golf ball because we're cutting across it. Effectively, all of these different movements are making consistency less likely, and you're just making good shots really hard to hit. And I'm sure you've been on the golf course and you just think to yourself, this is the hardest game on earth. Well, trust me, it can be easier if you can get your club into the slot. I would hazard a guess, so I'm not going to try and do it in this video, but if you was to put a ball down there, maybe on a slight tee, with a 7-iron, if I got myself into this slotted position, I could probably close my eyes and hit the golf ball pretty solid and pretty straight because I'm in that slot. I don't need timing, I don't need hand-eye coordination. But if I start to get myself out of position, the club's over here, the face is open, wow, that feels so much more difficult, and it is going to be so much more difficult. So how do you actually do it when you've got a golf club in your hands? Well, I want you to go and try the pump drill. This is one of the best exercises that I found to help you get that club into the slot. I'm going to take 2 alignment sticks. You could use 2 golf clubs if you didn't have them, and you're going to put them on your target line. I will move that golf club out the way in a moment. And what you're going to basically do is you're going to take your setup, you're going to make your movement to the top of your golf swing, and you're going to do some pump drills where you try and get your club shaft from your viewpoint, to how you see the swing, your club shaft to fall into that zone. My golf club, as I look down, is in that zone. Okay, and I just want to get a feel for what that's like. Into the zone. Into the zone. And I want to be checking this when the club is level with the ground. Okay, and it's going to be very, very easy for you to see. If you're someone who does this, I can see that's not in the zone. Or maybe you drop the club too far behind you, again, not in the zone. Very, very easy for you to see that. As soon as you see your club not in that zone, you can sort of say with a fair bit of certainty that you're making the game more difficult. Straighter shots are going to be harder to hit. Consistency is going to be harder to find, because based on the demonstration that we did at the start. And fat it, okay? So it's a little bit heavy, but that's fine. You know, we're practicing, and when you're practicing, you are going to be at a facility on a driving range. You're not going to be on the 8th hole in a match trying to make birdie. That's not the place to do it. So at this stage, really, I'm just looking at, did I make the right movement? And very often, if that right movement is different to what you're used to doing, it will feel a bit strange, and you might hit a few iffy shots, but that's absolutely fine. We're using our practice time to become more comfortable with these positions. So that would be the sort of path of the club into the ball. How do we control the hammer head, or actually the club face? Because that's also incredibly important. Well, when we're slotting that golf club into our zone, we want that club face to be pointing slightly towards the ground, as you can see there. If it's pointing up, it's incredibly open, hard to play golf from there. Or if it's excessively down, again, it would be difficult to play golf from there, although that is probably a better option. So slightly closed. So if you can get the club into the slot with the face pointing slightly down, you are in the best possible place to hit good shots, solid shots, straight shots with consistency. And the golf swing and the golf game will feel much easier. Now, if you can't get the club face into position, or that feels very alien to you, there's 2 things I would love you to check. Number 1, what is your grip like? Okay, the easiest grip test you can do, and this is by far the best that I found, and you can do this with both hands on, or you can do either hand. Take the club out in front of you, grooves at vertical. If your grip is neutral, you should have equal amounts of twist open and closed. So I can twist it closed to here, and I can twist it open to there. That was pretty equal. That tells me my grip is neutral. If my grip is weak, what happens? I can close it that much and open it that much. I can see that was an offset, it was a mismatch. It tells me my grip was weak, and I can do that with both hands. That's the first thing I'd love you to check. The second thing I'd love you to check is the position of your left wrist. It needs to be pretty flat as you arrive into this slotted position. If it's cupped, the club face will be open. So if you can get the club into the slot, that's how you make the game feel easier, play the game better. And as a little routine, I appreciate you're probably not going to have a hammer on the golf course, but you can do something similar. So take a golf club and just take your golf club and just flip it round so you've got the sort of end of the toe of the golf club, and you can create the same sort of little visual. So I've got the end of my club there, I've got the end of my hammer, and even just doing this gives me a really good idea and feeling of what I would need to do to hit that club or that post, you know, straight. It would feel like I want to do this. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense to come across from here or twist the end of the hammer. So whilst the end of my golf club isn't perfectly flat, it gives me a really good sensation of what I would need to do in order to hit that post down towards the target. That little drill will give you a really good idea as to what you need to do to get the club into the slot. It's what the best players do. It's how they're so consistent week in, week out.